I guess we'll do it that way.
Making movie, need help, unpaid.
Tell me when you're ready.
Whew. That La Croche sounds real crispy.
That's how I always start the show.
Back when I was taking a linguistics class with my my business partner, at the time, classmate Drew Bells. We were taking a linguistics class, and we were trying to remember the aspirate. I don't know, some sort of category of mouth sounds, and we made up a thing where we were like, because those are like the six sort of hard sounds or something. I sound like a real dum-dum.
Glotterals.
No, Sean. Glotterals don't exist. Maybe the glottal stop. I don't know. That's a glottal stop. You like those sound effects?
Intense. When I was a kid, I loved. I'm kind of blanking on the guy's name, but there were these beatboxers, you know, and there was one who did
Modest Yahoo.
Way before that.
I was gonna say he was.
Isn't he the Jewish rapper?
Yeah.
There was a guy though who did beatboxing for Slick Rick, and it almost like a drum solo. He had this song where it was just him doing like all these crazy sound effects, like cars and stuff, and then it turned into a beat. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's nasty, dog.
Sick. I'll clip it in.
The beat, the chorus at the same time. If you know the
Clip it in.
This morning I woke up and I had a little link in my inbox, and I opened it and started watching. I watched 10 minutes of the newest cut.
Oh, geez.
And
John.
I paused it at about 10 minutes in.
Yeah.
Because my spouse, who's here, she was getting ready for work.
Is she on the show?
No, heck no.
Where are you?
Dude, I walked in the other day. Actually, it was this morning. I dropped my kids off at school. I came home. I walked in the house, and I was like, is there a dude in here? And my wife, because I heard my voice. It dawned on me almost instantly, like, that's my voice. I thought maybe my wife was listening to a voicemail. She was walking around the house with the iPhone in her back pocket and blaring our podcast.
Dude,
Like,
that's how you know we've made it.
It was right at the point in the episode where I was accusing her of putting my dog in a concentration camp.
Oh, okay. So she was clearly tipped off.
Probably
she needed to listen to an episode so she could have some dirt on you.
But I watched the first 10 minutes this morning of the newest cut, and I paused it after 10 minutes because my wife is about to leave, and I said to her, "This is so much better."
Ooh.
And I paused it right around. This isn't even 5 minutes. I think it's about 5 minutes in. I paused it because I wanted to show her. I just wanted to show her how like tight the scenes were, how it was moving, you know, maybe just show her like 3 minutes right before she left, you know? And I paused it and I brought the computer in, and she looked at it. She looked at where it was on the time. She saw that it was in the beginning. She said, "Oh, the shower scene is in the beginning. Good idea."
Uh-huh.
And I said,
you know,
that's
how it was in the script.
Yeah. And it was in the middle. So for people that haven't seen it, there's a shower scene where Rufus takes...
For people who haven't seen it, which is 99% of people.
For everyone listening who's now confused, there's a shower scene, and I don't want to say any more.
Rufus, well, I'll say a little. Rufus lives at Rollers, which is not a house. Rollers is a concert venue, and there's not a shower there.
Right.
So he lives there because he has codependency issues with this building, and he builds himself a shower, and the shower is out back in an alley. And I had the idea that if I was going to make a shower, in the back alley of my concert venue, I would probably try to make it kind of like a shower and not a garden hose. So we made a shower out of a snare drum.
Which is sick. I didn't notice that the first time we watched it, or maybe I didn't resonate, but the way that it was presented in this cut was
Good.
strong, dude. It looked cool. It reminded me of my dad. He bought some property up in Pennsylvania when I was a kid, and he built this place basically from scratch. And there were all these hillbillies, Pennsylvania hillbillies, living around him. And he didn't have working bathrooms yet, anything. So he would take this huge jug of water, and he had rigged up this shower on a pulley system. So he could pull this like chain and it would tilt the thing and dump water on him,
That's awesome.
It's kind of sick. But he would be out there showering after working all day, and more than 10 times, this old lady, Lorraine Bobiak, would wander over to give him some eggs or something and see my dad out there showering. Yeah. And be like,
that's
oh,
so great.
Because
that's effectively what happens in the movie. That's
exactly.
So great. There's this homeless guy named Carl. I won't give anything else away about Carl. He's got some interesting physical features. And there's a homeless guy, Carl, who shows up and wants to take a shower, share the shower with Rufus. And Rufus is like, no, dude, not going to happen. That's hilarious. Oh, I love that.
So your
dad had some Amish hillbilly old lady showers.
Yeah.
So really quick on that. I'm glad you liked it. I feel like that captures a lot of how I felt. Well, so really quick, last night, I finished another cut yesterday.
Yep.
And I put it online, and then I had, let's say, 5 or 6 people over to watch the new cut, a formal test screening, another one.
Who was there?
I mean, no one will know names, but a musician who recently moved to LA, and his wife is a photographer, so they've become friends, and I invited them. Max Bells, quick shout out to Max Bells. I don't know if I can refer to him as a friend of the show because I don't think Max listens, but that's fine. Max, friend of mine, friend of yours, maybe not a friend of the show.
He's not my friend anymore, that's for sure.
No. Well, exactly.
Shout out to Max.
He's going to be moving, so he's a good buddy, and I wanted to have him over to make sure that he saw it, and he's very knowledgeable, very smart guy.
Yeah,
who's actually done some acting. A couple other folks. It was a great time. But anyway, the consensus was that the movie. Oh, and my buddy Ren, who is a friend of the show, does listen to the podcast. He, what's funny about Ren? I'll tell a quick story. He's a very talented screenwriter. He's out here working, and he went to a college in North Carolina called App State.
Okay.
And we met through another friend, Aman Abbasi, who directed Davion, who will hopefully be at the next test screening. Aman is absolutely just crushing it. It's sort of insane, the projects that I'm on. I can't really get into any specifics, unfortunately, because those aren't my specifics to share. But one day we'll have him on. Aman is just absolutely crushing it. Anyway, had a funny week with Aman, actually. I ran into him in a restaurant with Caleb Rexford, who's a good friend of mine, who works at Fancy Rhino, who's in Chattanooga. Caleb was out here. We're at a restaurant in Highland Park down the street, right by the venue. Who should walk in but Aman, who knows me and Caleb because he did a fellowship at Fancy Rhino and got to know Caleb. Small world.
Insane. Yeah.
Man, Aman is a very talented filmmaker. I met Ren, who's another good friend now, at Aman's birthday party probably a year and change ago.
Dang.
And Ren went to college with one of my best friends, Johnny Cate's younger brother, Chris Cate.
Whoa.
And we figured that out. I forget how, but they went to App State together. And anyway, weirdly small world. Ren's great, though, and he's an incredibly talented writer as well. And he was there. Anyway, dude, so the consensus was that somehow, against all odds, that the movie was worse than it was last time. No, just kidding. It was markedly better. I walked away, even just like you said, even within 15 minutes, I was kind of like, there's just a lot fewer things that make me unable to watch this movie, and I actually started off the feedback session.
Did you pop a bottle of champagne?
I did. Elizabeth brought some Prosecco that we did not get into, so I did open it. I was like, man, this was a very different experience.
Yeah.
But I asked everyone, I have all this recorded too. I asked everyone, what percentage of the movie made you want to turn the movie off? And then I asked everybody to kind of give their rose and thorn.
You're setting a really high bar.
No. I wanted to know, because I know that certain things are working, and what I wanted to know is, like, did you hate 25% of the movie? Did you hate 30% of the movie? Because the first time through, I wanted to turn it off about half the time,
right.
And I think there were a lot of people who felt that often, and it was very encouraging, because this time through, the number was closer to like 5%. Which was very encouraging, and I think for the first time, I'll say this, and then I want to shut up. I will say this: it was the first time I've even seen the movie, where I think I realistically, not aspirationally, but realistically, began to see the movie that I wanted to make, and I think that other people got a little bit of a glimpse of the movie that I want to make, not the movie that is sort of stuck in editing purgatory. And that was very encouraging, because I knew it was there.
Yeah.
It's sort of like when your friend or something or your wife, or I don't know, my wife's never been pregnant, but when someone's pregnant, it's like eventually you just think they're pregnant and you kind of forget that there's a baby in there. And then all of a sudden they show up with a baby and you're like, But
first that thing's got to punch through that tummy and get out.
Yeah. Exactly.
I said to my wife,
that's the difference between babies and movies. Is movies much more resemble Alien, the movie, than any sort of real birth process. It's much bloodier and more disgusting.
That's for sure. Well, I said to my wife this morning, I paused, because what I realized, as soon as I realized
who is an accomplished creator in her own right, so I very much value her opinion, because she knows how to judge things and efforts. Right. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah, and I mean, she definitely knows the theatrical world more than, say, the film world, but she's just all around knowledgeable. But I said to her, I paused it, and I said, I realized as soon as I saw that the shower scene was in the beginning, that you had taken the notes from the critique session 2 weeks ago or whatever, and correctly implemented them. That's what I saw, like almost instantly. And I paused it after a few minutes, and I said to her, I think he did it. I think he did
Boom,
it.
Baby.
Boom,
and baby.
So the reason I paused it was because we're going to watch it together, hopefully tonight, the whole thing. But yeah, dude, it was exciting to see that, because, I had watched it and I felt two ways about it, the first draft. And I told you that. Right. One was, you made a movie that's insane. The other part of it was, it needs to be a lot tighter. And that's what you heard pretty much from everybody at that first session. Right. We already went through all that.
Yeah, to recap, it was kind of like, I like a lot about this. It's surrounded by a lot of things that I also like that don't feel as important.
You had a lot of the good elements there that needed to be wrestled into order. And I could tell almost instantly that you had definitely started to do that. I haven't seen the whole thing, so I can't say for sure, but we'll see soon.
Well, I'm trying to, I guess I'm really trying to figure out how to, I don't know, to fold the movie in on itself, like a croissant. I've always said this, the script has gone through this process many times. I want layers. And I think part of what was so gut-wrenching about the first one is I saw all this stuff that had to go. And like I said, one of my first questions was, will this still be the same movie at the end of all of this?
Yeah.
I think what was really encouraging about the last week and a half of editing was realizing that if I'm just a little harder on myself, and you'll see when you watch it, I still need to go in and fold more, because in some cases what I need to do is be like, there's this scene that's kind of long and there's no dialogue and I'm just telling a story visually, and then there's this other scene that's a little boring on the visual side, but it's really important information. Maybe I can figure out a way to combine those. Maybe I can figure out a way to things like that. Again, create layers, create efficiency in the storytelling, not just because it should be shorter, because I really don't care how long the length is. And for the first time, I will say this. One participant in the test screening last night, I'm not going to take this and run with it necessarily, but it was encouraging. They said, I feel like it could have been longer. And I was like, great. I'm not going to make it longer, but I am glad to hear that you weren't bored silly. And I think
that's good feedback.
And I think what's happening is like for instance, I did another cut earlier this week and uploaded a really crappy version of that I just sent to a couple people like Tara. And it was 94 or 5 minutes. This one, it was even shorter. It was, I think, 92 or 93, but I actually figured out a way to squeeze in, I want to say, 3 or 4 scenes that had been completely cut. And I was able to do that because I was kind of finally had enough distance to cut out, in some cases, the 20 or 30% of the scene that was sort of just there and not essential. And then that allows you to bring other stuff back in, and all of a sudden the movie starts feeling very rich and very efficient, as opposed to like, wow, we've been in this part of the story for a long time. So
yeah, you also did a bunch of voice. I can tell you.
Oh yeah, the voice.
You did some voiceover.
One of the, I kind of mentioned this, but it was pretty unclear because I don't like to give too many caveats. She was like, I like doing voices and they don't always sound like me. and she said, she was like, I'm pretty sure this was temp, but I just want to make sure because it took me out of it a little bit.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, just having fun with it.
Yeah, totally. And it's going to be replaced, obviously. In fact, it was kind of taking a whole other direction, baby. But it's funny, and it actually was helpful that it was kind of. I only saw the first couple minutes of this new cut, but I think it makes more sense that it's blatant. You know what I mean? As opposed
because then it calls attention. Like,
yeah, I'm going to change
to
this,
what their
obviously.
purpose is. Yeah.
Right. That was helpful. So no, I liked all.
Yeah,
that.
that's actually a good point. That's one thing. I'm getting to that point where certain parts of the movie are okay. So one interesting thing I'll say about this particular screening is the feedback was centered on completely different things. Like, there was one character who, let's call it like a storyline that felt like it was overly developed in a previous draft, because it was just it just felt like it was distracting from the A story. That was one of the comments where it was like, actually, I kind of want more of that. And again, I'm trying to figure out ways to fold things in, but it was interesting because there were things that everyone noticed. For instance, there's one scene and every single person agreed the coverage used in that scene is a little disorienting. The angle's very low. I like it at the beginning.
Yeah, totally agree with
that. A little
that.
disorienting. You know which one I'm talking about?
Exactly. Yeah, and
but no one said that in a previous screening because I think the triage of the conversation led us to deal with much more significant issues. So now we're getting to the point where it's like, okay, great. Like, I don't feel the need to tell you how the story isn't working in Act 2 because the story's working in Act 2. Now I can pay even more attention. But that is its own difficult process in a way because you're like, wow, it's getting so much closer. And then only because of that, only because you've stopped the bleeding, can you now see that like your fingernails are kind of nasty. You know what I mean?
So I definitely noticed that. So there's a scene where it's two guys in a room, the main guy and another character. And the tall guy is shot at an extreme low angle looking up at him. And I noticed it because it's the type of angle you would see, say, like in a horror movie.
Right.
Or like an extremely intense scene. And I definitely noticed it, but I thought to myself, back then, it's not worth noting in the sense that obviously other
bigger
issues.
stuff.
And
Yep.
I don't know if you have another shot of that, do you?
Right. No, I definitely do. That's an example of that was the I do like that shot. It just doesn't need to be in there as much as it is, you know?
Right.
And that's one of those situations where in an edit, so we haven't even talked that much about the process of editing in a way, but one of the things about editing, you're looking at a giant mountain from the bottom. I can't remember if we've talked about this, but I've sort of been trying to think about this metaphor partly just because it helps me. It's as if you're looking at this big mountain and you know there's a way to the top, but you got to even just figure out which side of the mountain you're going to climb. You know, do you go up from the north side? Do you go up from the south side? Do you swing around? And the does that make sense? The
100%.
thing about writing is that you're picking the mountain first of all, which is a big part of writing. You're saying I'm going to climb this mountain and not this mountain. But there's still a lot of ways up the mountain, and you're not on it yet though. So you're kind of making a map, a trail map from the bottom. Now, sometimes you get lucky. And I think in a lot of ways we did get lucky with rollers in the sense that the path we picked up, the path we chose to try to walk up the mountain was pretty close to the right path. But interestingly, I did make certain weird decisions because, you know, what happens is you during production and editing, you start up the mountain. That's the process of actually climbing the mountain. And you very quickly find out that, like, as you were climbing to the top, the path behind you got avalanched, and all of a sudden you got to figure out a new way down because that option is no longer available to you. And so I think editing is almost like the way down the mountain, and you've got to figure out a new way to get down. Otherwise, the whole journey was kind of in vain. Because on the way up, you're like, whoa, I ended up on a completely different side of this thing than I ever expected, and I got to figure out how to get back to where I was. So I think about it a lot like that, and I think that I don't want to say I wasted time, but I needed to explore some options, to walk down some paths that had dead ends that I did not realize, to weirdly kind of end up closer to where the script originally was. And ironically, I think I had to let go of certain things in order to have enough room in the movie to tell the movie exactly the way that I originally wanted. And I've realized I couldn't have gone into production and shot the movie exactly the way I wrote it. It never would have worked. The vibes wouldn't have worked. Like, that's part of the reason I got really excited about letting people play around and having more fun and improv, and because it's a tricky movie tonally. And I realized within even the first day or two, I was like, you know, as much as I would love to rehearse this thing like a play and kind of come in and be able to choose every single moment and rehearse it beforehand, we don't have time to rehearse. Like, in some cases we had like 15 minutes to rehearse these scenes. So I don't get to do that. So I had to give everybody a little bit of freedom to kind of find certain things and then give them feedback as we went. But again, that type of stuff, it opens up new pathways. And anyway, so that's a scene where I do have other stuff. The thing that I've got to figure out is when you can kind of pick the fast way down in an edit, or you can pick the sort of like, you can pick the, like, I just got to get down, but then you can't like bring your cart down behind you. You know what I mean? Like, there's a better way to get down. And sometimes you just have to get down and then go back up and then come back down a better way once you've like gotten some food. So I feel like there's a few scenes like that where I'm like, okay, performance wise, this whole path is serviceable or really good, and the angle is less than desirable, but it's going to take a long time to sort of go through the 12 different takes of the whole thing and figure out which combination of performances and angles cut together to make the scene feel exactly the way it needs to feel. So in a way, that's like a temp edit. Does that make sense?
Totally. Do you think part of what happened with the first draft that was showed to people, which really, dude, I think
that was garb.
Yeah,
just kidding.
it wasn't garbage, but it was not. It was not a complete like cohesive thing. we've talked about
No.
this before,
There
but
were a lot of areas where you had to use your imagination.
do you think what that was looking back was that you were excited to showcase what you had?
Can you rephrase that? I feel like, well, let me ask you this. Are you asking, did I show it prematurely?
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. There's a really great proverb. I should find that. Just give me 2 seconds.
I got you. A shrewd man keeps his knowledge to himself, but a foolish heart proclaims its folly.
Yes, exactly. I love that because I tend to be the foolish heart who's like, I'm so pumped. And I'm like, I show things early, because I want affirmation.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that there was an aspect of that where I was like, I know this isn't ready. And then also I think I needed people that I trust to confirm for me
Mm-hmm.
that yes, in fact, you do have to be harder on yourself than you originally expected to.
Mm-hmm.
You have to go through this trial by fire to come out with the tight version. And it was a painful enough process to let go of some of those things. In individual scenes, it was a painful enough process, as I discussed, that I think I did need, I don't want to call it like a public humiliation. It wasn't really that, but I needed to learn that lesson. I needed to really feel that. And in a way, this one put different mistakes in that same sense of relief. In fact, there's just one part towards the end of the movie, one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie, and Olive is like scratch. I can hear Olive, my dog, producer of the show, in the in the kitchen during this very quiet, fun scene, just making such a clickety clack racket. And she does this thing, and I knew this was what she was doing because I could hear it. She is not terribly intelligent. Well, actually, she's very smart because she knows exactly how to get my attention to get exactly what she wants. When she's thirsty because her bowl is empty, she scratches not the bowl, but the pad that the bowl sits on. She just moves it around the room, making as much noise as possible. And I could hear her doing this in the other room because the screening area that we were watching was like 5 feet from the kitchen.
Sure.
And I was like, oh, geez, this is like my favorite part of the movie. You fucking kidding me? One that I have had a hard time cutting down because I've been very attached to it. But I knew there was another sort of more important moment coming up soon. So I jumped up, gave her some water. By the time I came back, I was like, I wish the scene started here, because I'm effectively starting the scene here. I just had this dramatic sort of halt in the process of watching this by leaving the room at an awkward moment. And I came back and I was like, oh, I kind of don't miss anything that I just missed. I kind of wish I could just jump in. And then the feedback again was like, oh, I freaking love that scene, but I don't need the minute and a half kind of leading into it. It was like, so in a way, Olive is now partially responsible for cutting a solid 2 minutes out of the movie. So way to go, Olive.
To give her producer credit.
Exactly. I mean, she's already producing the show, so might as well just bring her into the movie.
So you got pretty good feedback. I mean, people enjoyed it.
Well, so I made a little questionnaire, which I'm going to be sending out throughout the process of doing test screenings this summer. Because, here's the thing that I don't know if everyone understands about test screenings. The idea is to show people things that are intentionally incomplete because I want to get them to help me think about how it could be better. And so, for example, it's not because I think it's done. There are things that I don't like, and maybe I even know how I want to fix it, but it is so much more efficient to let people in on the process in the middle.
Right.
And so test screenings, when I say feedback, like I have a questionnaire, it feels very clinical in a way. But part of that is because I'm not going, it's like, I'll give you some examples. Without imagining what the movie could be, what was your experience of the movie as it currently is? And you have choices: instant classic, excellent, good, decent, not good, and terrible. And And then there was a question of like, within reason, how good do you think the movie could be? Please rate your experience of the movie from please God make it stop to I'd gladly watch it again. And like, who's your favorite character? What's your least favorite character? And I think, these are, but then it gets even longer where it's like, did you feel like there were any plot holes, or did you find anything confusing that was not cleared up by the movie? Please be specific. What are your feelings about the way the movie ended? What are your feelings about the way the movie began? How is your feeling about the pace of the beginning? All these things, like if you had a pair of magic scissors, meaning they're magic in the sense that there's no ripple effect, like you can just get rid of anything you want. What would you cut? If you could add anything to the movie, a character, a scene, a set piece, a location, what would it be?
George Clooney.
See, that's good to know. What movies does this remind you of? So anyway, the questions, my job is not to actually let people try to fix the movie for me.
Right.
Because I think that is sometimes even what I thought. Test screen. It was like, no, I have a vision. I need it. And what you're really doing with the test screening is you're saying, how can I communicate more clearly to you? It's not so much like, what do you want to see more of? Because again, people, usually the feedback you get is, I think it could be longer, or I think I miss being with this character when I'm not with them. And that's the kind of feedback where what you kind of can't do is say, great, I'll add more of that character. What you have to do is look for the note behind the note and say, is that a good thing that they missed that character? Because that means they care about them. And you have to do a lot of interpretation. And so in some ways, having somewhat standardized forms of feedback allows you to create more, sort of do a more helpful analysis of trends. So if everyone says they hate a certain character, again, it's not your job to take that just at face value and say, okay, I guess I'll get rid of that character. What you have to do is figure out, do they hate them in the way that people hate anti-heroes, or do they hate them in the way that they just don't like them because they're bad? And you have to figure out which is which, and you have to figure out what to do about it.
Is it anonymous when you give these out?
Yeah, I think what we're going to do is have them be anonymous to me effectively. But Elizabeth, speaking of which, Elizabeth, we have a new member of the Mama Bear team. Elizabeth Alcorn. She helped us. She was an associate producer on the project. She's been helping us since the beginning of production, and she's going to be joining Mama Bear. And
say what?
I'm really pumped. Yeah, she's working at Mama Bear. So Elizabeth will, be. Wait, why did I bring up Elizabeth?
She's going to anonymize the feedback?
Oh, yeah, she's going to anonymize the feedback so that if we want to clarify something, or if someone has a really good idea or a really good note, we can still find them and figure out who's whose. But I don't want anyone to feel like they can't speak honestly, because that's the whole point of this.
So you haven't read the feedback from last night?
No, I don't know if everyone's completely filled it out.
Got you. But in the room,
but I did record the conversation we had.
What was the best and worst feedback, related to the movie? Like, this is the best thing about it, worst thing about it.
Okay, so for example, someone kind of picked up on one of the major themes, which was, I'll just say it because it's not like, this is not a secret. It's not like a plot twist. Hold on, my dogs are going nuts.
Got to fill that water dish up.
So,
best and worst feedback.
All right, so best and worst feedback. Yeah, so we're doing Rose and Thorn. I would say the best, most sort of exciting feedback was that someone, and again, this was a note, I don't want to say a complaint, but a critique, where they basically said, I'm not sure why Rufus is so attached to this place, because it feels like it's just this shell of what it used to be, and it feels like the only thing that's, I'm paraphrasing, but it feels like the only thing that's left with Rollers, this venue that he's trying to save, is music. And they basically said, like, it feels like I have a hard time in some cases empathizing with his desire to save this, because he seems so unhappy. And I was like, man, that's great. That's a great note, because to me, that's part of what I'm trying to set up. And clearly I have not fully finished the process of presenting that to the audience in a way that instead of just feeling like it's an incomplete thing, that by the end of the movie, they kind of come around and see what I'm trying to say. But what I'm really trying to say is, Rufus does have a complicated relationship with this place, and it isn't a typical sort of save the farm story. There are a lot of complicated emotions about this place, and that is kind of what the movie's about. And the fact that you were able to articulate that entire journey that he takes is super encouraging, because that means that the story's working. And yet I still have to, like, I think, push, because when I said exactly, I went into a little more detail and I said, look, this is not me defending myself, but I do want to see if you guys feel like this idea, this narrative that I'm sort of saying on this thematic level is all there. And if so, if you have any ideas about how to make it come out more. And so I sort of pitched a more detailed version of that, and everyone was like, oh, I get it, but I don't know that I put all those pieces together until you just explained it. And so it's a little bit of like I have like that 10% sort of gap left to close. Otherwise, I think not everyone's ever going to get all of it.
Right.
That's fine. But I do think it's kind of like, this isn't poetry, like I do need people to get it pretty much the first time. And if it rewards further viewings and it has depth, that's great. But I kind of can't afford to force people to, I can't assume that they're going to sit with this thing and watch it 3 times. Like, that's just not realistic. I do have to make it accessible, and I have to challenge the audience, make them be participatory in the process of figuring out what the movie's about and understanding the characters. But I also have to make sure that I'm not asking them to do all the work.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, nowadays too, like, these are your friends watching it right now, and people that are invested in you in various ways. But eventually, people that don't give a shit will be watching this.
Yep. Totally.
And if it doesn't grab them, most people aren't given to try again on entertainment.
No, I'm not some director who people are kind of like, I know it's really dense, but trust me, it's worth it. Like, it's worth, you got to get into it. You got to throw yourself into it. It's not, I'm not there. I don't have that luxury of being like, trust me, I just got to make you
got to grab them.
I got to grab them by the neck.
So
no, speaking of which, I don't want to grab anybody. I want to, okay. So John, I sent you this poem. This is my new filmmaker goal, because this is sort of, there's even a really funny video. I think it'll be funny. Right before the first test screening, Aaron, who does all of our BTS stuff, was there, and he was asking me how I felt. And I was explaining how I had to sort of, I had been in this sort of brutal wrestling match with the movie, and I had to wrestle it into submission. And of course, that was immediately followed by a devastatingly disappointing screen. And I clearly had not wrestled the movie into submission. I clearly had been beaten. And it was just funny because I was sort of exaggerating, but I don't know. You'll see. It'll probably go in the BTS doc. Anyway, I think then I found this poem a couple weeks ago, soon after the screening, and I felt like it really shed some light on where I went wrong. I mean, I feel like I could probably spend the rest of my life working on this type of philosophy when it comes to my profession, and probably still find things in it. So I plan on keeping this poem around. I like it a lot. It's called Cutting Up an Ox, from the Chinese of Chuang Tzu. This was translated by a guy named Thomas Merton. I don't know what year, doesn't matter. So this is an old Chinese poem. Prince Wen Hu's, I didn't think about reading this poem. I got to read like Chinese names out loud. That's embarrassing. I'm going to do my best. When Prince Wen Hu's cook was cutting up an ox, out went a hand, down went a shoulder. He planted a foot. He pressed with a knee. The ox fell apart. With a whisper, the bright cleaver murmured like a gentle wind. Rhythm, timing, like a sacred dance, like the mulberry grove, like ancient harmonies. Good work, the prince exclaimed. Your method is faultless. Method, said the cook, laying aside his cleaver. What I follow is Tao beyond all methods. When I first began to cut up oxen, I would see before me the whole ox, all in one mass. After 3 years, I no longer saw this mass. But now I see nothing with the eye. My whole being apprehends. My senses are idle. The spirit, free to work without plan, follows its own instinct, guided by natural line. By the secret opening, the hidden space, my cleaver finds its own way. I cut through no joint, chop no bone. A good cook needs a new chopper once a year. He cuts. A poor cook needs a new one every month. He hacks. I have used this same cleaver for 19 years. It has cut up 1,000 oxen. Its edge is as keen as if newly sharpened. There are spaces in the joints. The blade is thin and keen. When this thinness finds that space, there is all the room you need. It goes like a breeze. Hence, I have this cleaver 19 years as if newly sharpened. True, there are sometimes tough joints. I feel them coming. I slow down, I watch closely, hold back, barely move the blade, and whump. The part falls away, landing like a clod of earth. Then I withdraw the blade. I stand still and let the joy of the work sink in. I clean the blade and put it away. Prince Wan Hu said, "This is it. My cook has shown me how I ought to live my own life." Cutting up an ox.
Yeah.
Isn't that great though? I feel like that's what I want to do. I want to get there with filmmaking one day where I'm just like, I'm not making the movie. I'm kind of just freeing the movie. You know, I'm freeing it. I'm not there. I still have to wrestle. I'm still like hacking away at bones and stuff. But I do think I glimpsed a little bit of that in this edit where I was like, all right, stop fighting the movie and start kind of asking the movie what the movie needs to be, what it wants to be, and find those little spaces where it just naturally works together, you know, where you just naturally move from this scene to this scene and where you just naturally sort of feel the beat of the scene progressing as opposed to being like, I have to force this joke to work.
Oh, yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, it's a great poem. You sent it to me, and I thought a lot about it.
Man, Thomas Merton, for all you folks out there, Thomas Merton was a monk, and John brought to my attention, I did not quite know this. I knew he died very mysteriously, that some of his fellow monks think that the CIA murdered him, assassinated him, because he died in a very strange way while he was in Thailand. He was like electrocuted or something. Anyway, really interesting dude who just wrote a lot about, you know, philosophy and
apparently he staged a mini revival in the land with one of his books. And all of these guys after World War II, all these veterans and just random dudes in America took pilgrimages around the world to various monasteries and religious sites because of a book that he wrote, his memoir. Yeah, it sounds like a fascinating guy. One of the thing to talk about, I would think, is the short that we worked on, or at least you guys worked on. I came out there while
you
on Fortune Teller, just Dave Farino.
You know, we watched the short as a sort of a preamble to the movie last night. It was very fun. Yeah.
What did they think about the short? Did they like it?
Oh, it's terrifying. Yeah, people freaking love it. Everybody wanted to watch it again. I was like, nope. But it's like 4 minutes long. It's legitimately pretty scary, I think. And it's gross. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's a whole thing. I mean, basically Bryce and I and this guy, Dave Farino, he came on the show. We talked to him. We spoke with and to him. He made a short. Bryce and I produced it, and it's good. And the goal is that we're going to take it out to studios and other people who make movies and be like, hey, we got this freaking sick proof of concepts. You know, Dave can direct the crap out of this movie. We've got a great concept. We've got a treatment for how the movie will work. You're trying to do some biz, dog? and they're going to be like, yeah, let me give you like $100 million. And we're going to be like, no, we don't want that much, because then you'll tell us what to do. Give us less. And they'll be like, okay, whatever you want. That's kind of what we want to do.
Yeah, I mean, it is good, and it's exciting. I read the treatment last night that you sent me. It's fascinating because it seems like there's this entire industry in the horror genre where you make a short, scary little, basically short film that would potentially be one sequence in a bigger movie. Am I right about
Right.
that?
Yep. In a way, it may or may not actually end up in there, but yeah, the idea is that you want to make it so that people have to use their imaginations as little as possible, because development execs have to say no to almost everything.
Right.
They just can't. And so our job is to make it easy to say yes.
And you do that by saying, I've already got characters. Here they are in this little short. I've already got
Precisely.
the concept. Here it is. It's tight. I've got
Yep.
the screen.
And
got
for
everything.
Dave as a director, you can see that he can pull it off.
Yeah, it was a cool process. So eventually you guys will go to studios, you'll sell it, and they'll turn it into, at that point, would they have to keep Dave as a director and writer?
Not necessarily.
Yeah, but he'll get paid either way, right?
Yeah, so we got to decide. I mean, that's part of what we'll eventually have to decide, is like, if it depends on who wants to make it and under what conditions. And that's part of what Bryce and I have to do, is find those opportunities.
And in terms of rollers, you have this cut. Sounds like you still have more cutting to do based on what you're saying, but
I do.
Not a crazy amount.
Well, what's weird is it's like a house. Like, you get the frame up and then you get the drywall up and you're like, we're done. And then somehow you end up spending almost as much time finishing it as you did doing all the big stuff, because the details take a long time, and the details, there are many of them. And what you find, again, if you're paying good attention, is don't get me wrong, we're getting closer, but there is definitely a period of like nitpicking, and that takes time, because sometimes you just got to sit with it. You got to live in it. You got to send it out to people and wait for them to watch it. And that takes time, but yeah, we're getting very close. The next stage will be what we call picture locking, which is like, the movie is not done, but we're kind of committing to not moving cuts around too much, because we need to get the thing scored. That was another huge compliment, is somebody basically said, like, I know there's no score, it's just a soundtrack at this point, but I felt like even without the score, and I've seen scores turn some dog shit turds into very palatable projects, because I mean, you work in advertising long enough, you polish quite a few turds, and score can do a lot. And so my goal is like, let's make this movie work without score, so that Dan, our composer, can go in and just be like, "Bagang! I'm just going to make this. I'm going to put icing on a cake that is so delicious it doesn't even need icing, but now it's going to have the perfect amount of icing, and it's going to blow your freaking mind." That's what I want to do. So we got to picture lock it, because scoring, Dan, works with every beat of dialogue, and he doesn't just slap music in there. He's he's got to wait until I'm like, no, the movie's basically this.
And which
is scary, because I got to freaking commit to something,
right,
which I don't want to do.
And you still have to. Would you do ADR, dialogue replacement, before you send it to?
That's a good question. It'll all be kind of part of the post process. But no, we'll probably picture lock it and start doing sound before then.
How long do you anticipate until that happens, till you send it out for scoring?
Man, what's the date? Today's the 7th?
May 7th.
Wowza meowza. So I'm doing another test screening a week from yesterday. And I would say I would like to have a picture locked version, not necessarily like I'm never changing anything, but a pretty darn close one in, let's call it 2 weeks, maybe a week and a half.
Whew. You think you can do it? I mean, obviously you do.
I don't know. I really don't know. We'll see. But it's we'll get where we get.
Are you going to hire a polish editor?
Oh yeah, that's what I was gonna say. So the next step is I think I am talking to a couple people. I feel like once I get the beats down and really like cut all the scenes and pick performances I like, yeah, I want to get somebody with fresh eyes to come in here and be like, yo, you never thought of this, but let me try this with you real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you like it. And I'm going to be like, yeah, that's so dope, dude. I could have never done that myself. I really want to do, get that kind of situation going if possible.
Mm-hmm.
Where
California
somebody's
Bros
like,
from the 80s.
yeah, dude, they're the best polish editors.
Gnarly.
Gnar. Shredding some gnar.
How do you find that polish editor? Craigslist?
Yeah. Making movie, need help, unpaid, and then you get
8,000.
You get all sorts of people. No, I'm talking to a couple people. I will be sure to let everyone know who it is once I pick them. Part of it is I don't really have money, so I got to find somebody who's like loves it, feels invested in it. But no, I mean it's somebody who is a true professional editor as opposed to kind of a hacky professional editor. Like I'm a good enough editor to service my directing desires.
Right.
I'm not truly a good editor in the sense that I haven't put in as many hours, especially in the last years, as people who are truly talented. Right. So yeah, that'll be good. I feel like I had one other thing that I wanted to bring up, but I want feedback from people. No one's writing in to tell us who they are.
What?
They're still listening, thankfully.
You sure?
I have not gotten any emails. Yeah, they're still listening. Let's do a quick. Oh no, I gotta go. This has been a plane.
It's always a pleasure. Talk to you soon.
Yep. All right.
Yeah. They say if you watch something long enough, you'll become it. They say imitation is the best form of flattery. That's what I was told. A lot of niggas is imitating this real gangster shit. You ain't cut from it. You did?